In this video, I want to show you how to track your time in Notion in the most efficient way. And you can also do it on a free plan. Do you really know where every minute of your day goes? Or are you still living in the day with no clue where your hours went? By the end of this video, your tracker will almost fill itself. So you will finally see what you did, for whom, and how much it earned. So no gaps, no guesswork. And it's not magic, it's a simple system anyone can recreate. To build it, I gathered all my knowledge and funneled it into this, and on top I also did research. So you might ask yourself now, why do I need a time tracker? Think of your time tracker like a security cam where you can save clips. Without that camera, it's guesswork where you spend your time, especially if you do it for days in the past. But with it, you have proof where your time went. And on top, you can even go back in time and look things up because you have data. In this video, I want to show you 4 levels of time tracking. Each one will build up on one another, and in every chapter we will add at least one thing. So make sure to stick to the end because there we will build the ultimate time tracking dashboard. You don't want to miss that. This is the dashboard where I included all my knowledge. And for those who don't know me, my name is Leon and I've spent over 2000 hours in Notion learning, experimenting, building things, breaking and rebuilding things. And here is time tracking in Notion. In this chapter, I want to show you how to do basic time tracking in Notion. One with automations, which is a paid feature, and one with buttons, which is a free feature. Now let's first look at the left side. And here are our 2 options. Now for the automations, which you can see here, automations are stored here. If this is blue, we created an automation. Here we don't have an automation. We can just set it to in progress. And now you can see the start date is being created. And now we can set this to done and an end date will get created. And the difference is exactly 1 minute, which is displayed here. Now we can do the same things for buttons, but here we don't trigger our status. We click on this start button and the progress is being set to in progress and we have a start date. Now we can click on end and an end date is being created and we also have 1 minute difference. So the first one is with automations and the same one is with buttons, but we get the same result. Now let's rebuild this on the right side. First, we need to add a start date, in this case date, call it start date, then an end date, call it end date, and we need a formula property and call this time. Now we need to create the formula, which we have on the left side here. So click into time and then we can write a formula. First, what we need to do is we need to select the date between formula because we want to have the difference between this and this. Then we need to select our end date, which we can find here, then write comma, and then select our start date. So we have our end date and our start date, and now we need a unit. In this case, we want to have minutes, so we write comma and then minutes. And once we did that, we can see we have no errors left, so we can click on done. Now what we need to do is we need to create the automation. So click on create automation. Then we need to have a trigger. So what needs to happen in order to do something? Our trigger is when the status is set to in progress. Let's call this start time tracking. And in the do section, we now want to edit a property, in this case, our start date, and we want to select it to the time this gets triggered. So this is our first automation. We need 2 in total. So now you can click on enable and then click on plus new automation. Again, call this stop time tracking. And we need to select a trigger again, in this case, when the status is set to complete. And what we want to do then is we want to, in this case, set our end date to the time triggered and enable this. So as you can see, when I now set this to in progress, we get our start date. Let's also wrap this in this view and shrink it a bit, not that much, this size. And let's wait until over a minute is passed to trigger this. But first we can recreate it with buttons. In this case, as you can see above, we also need a start date. So call this start date. And we also need an end date. So rename this to end date. And same here, we also need a formula. So go into the menu, select formula, and also call this time. What we also need to add here is we need two button properties. So we click on button once and we want to call this start, and then we need another button. So click on button again and call this end. Then we can drag them in the front here, and same with this one, and we can make it smaller. Then before we proceed, we can set this to done to check if we also get an end date and the time. And this is the case. We can also wrap this and shrink it, and we can see the difference is exactly 2 minutes as displayed here. So this is working. Now we need to make this work. For the time, we can just go in here, press Command Shift and the left arrow key, and then Command C to copy the formula and just paste it in here, and we are finished. The last thing we need to do is we need to manipulate our buttons. So we need to edit the automation. For the start button, what we want to do is we want to edit the property in this page, and we want to set the status to in progress, and then our start date to time triggered. Then click on save, and then we also need to edit the automation for our end button. In this case, go into edit property again, set the status to done, and set the end date to time triggered. Now let's also check if this is working. Click on start and we get in progress and the start date, and if we click on end, we get an end date and the time is 0. So let's change this to 11:45 a.m. to get 1 minute, which is totally right. Now we can also wrap this in view and shrink it, same with this property. So shrink it, same with the time formula, and now we are done. But there are still things missing, like an hourly rate and a money earned formula. But now that's it for this chapter. Let's move on to the next chapter. In this chapter, I want to show you how to add an hourly rate as well as a money earned formula. From now on, we will only work with buttons instead of automations so that everyone, even on the free plan, can follow along till the end of this video. Let's first look what it looks like on the left side. Now we can open this and we can select an hourly rate. Let's say we have an hourly rate of 10 euros. Then we can, as we did before, click our start button. We set the status to in progress and a start date is being logged. Now we can click on end date and we see we worked for 1 minute and our money earned is 17 cents. Now I changed the time difference from 11:56 a.m. to 12:56 p.m. So exactly 1 hour. We can see this, we have 60 minutes. And because it's 1 hour and we have an hourly rate, we see 10 euros earned. So our formulas work. Now let's rebuild this on the right side. So the first thing we need to do is we need to select a number property and call this hourly rate. The second property that we need is we need a formula property and call this money earned. Now for the hourly rate property, change this to our currency. In my case, it's euro, and set this to 2 decimal places. Now let's rebuild the formula we have on the left side here. Click into the formula property, and then we want to select our time minutes property. Then we want to divide this by 60 to get hours. So we write dot divide and then in parentheses 60. After that, we need to multiply this with our hourly rate. So we write dot multiply and then we select our hourly rate. And that's the formula we want to create. So now we can click on done and we can set and we can start time tracking. Now we can click on end and let me open this in SidePeek and drag this over here. So now as you can see, I set the start date to 11:01 a.m. and the end date to 12:01 p.m. So the time difference is exactly 60 minutes, so 1 hour. And if we set our hourly rate to 10 euros, you can see we also get 10 euros for our money earned. So this is right. If I would now set this to 20, we would get 20 in 1 hour. So everything is working fine. But there are still things missing, like an estimated time we could set to see if there is time missing or if we hit our target. But that's it for this chapter. Let's move on to the next chapter. In this chapter, I want to add an estimated time to your database as well as a time check formula. First, let's see how everything works or it looks like on the left side. So now let me open this in SidePeek so you can see. Now we can set an estimated time. Let's say, for example, 45 minutes and an hourly rate of 10 euros. Then we can click on start and I will now click on end and manipulate this myself. So now let me set this to 1:06 p.m. So exactly 1 hour. So you can see we have 60 minutes. We earned 10 euros because our hourly rate is 10 euros. And we can see we exceeded our time limit because we said we want to work on it for 45 minutes, but we worked on it for 60 minutes. If I would set this to, for example, 70 minutes, you can see we didn't exceed the time limit. And now let's rebuild this on the right side. Now let me add the properties in SidePeek because it's much more convenient. First, let's add a number property and call it estimated time. Then we can drag this all the way to the top here. And we also need a formula property. So select a formula property and call it time check. Then click into the formula property. And now we want to build the formula for the time check. The first thing that we need is an if function because we have two cases. We exceeded our time limit or we didn't exceed our time limit. So go into the parentheses, press Shift and Enter to separate the parentheses and to be able to type something between them in another row. Then we want to access our estimated time property. And we want to check if this is bigger or equal to our time in minutes. So, which means that if we said, for example, this is 60 and we worked for 60 minutes on this, these two are equal. Or if I said 70 minutes estimated time and we got 60, this is bigger than this. So now we can press comma and we can define our first use case if this is correct. What we want to write is we want to write time limit not exceeded because our estimated time is either bigger or exactly the time we worked on this. Now let's also give this a nicer style. Go into style and select green as well as green background. After that, write comma, press Shift and Enter again. And now we want to define our second half of the if function, the case if our estimated time is smaller than this. In this case, we want to write time limit exceeded, and we also want to style this in red and with a red background. Now, the last thing I want to do to make this even better looking, we could also add, for example, a B to make this bold and an B here to make this bold, but we can only apply this once, and we can style the whole thing regardless of what happens. I say it doesn't matter if we get this text or this text, also apply a bold format as well as a code format. So let's set an estimated time of 45 minutes as well as an hourly rate of 10 minutes. Then we can click on start and on end. And now let me manipulate this to 1:13 p.m. So exactly 1 hour. And we can see we worked for 60 minutes. And because we have an hour and an hourly rate of 10 euros, we earned 10, which is right. And we exceeded our time limit, which is also right. Now let me set this to 61 minutes, which means that we didn't exceed our time limit, and 60 is also not exceeding our time limit. But there is still something very important that we could do. Just imagine you can't end a task in one go. So I also need to work on this task tomorrow, but I can only set one start and one end date. So I can't set another start and end date for this task. I could do this in my head and sum up the hours I worked and manipulate these entries and how much time I spent on it, but it's way too much work. And I also couldn't replicate it the right way. So the only thing that I could say is, let's say I worked today for 60 minutes and I will work tomorrow for 60 minutes. I can say, for example, okay, then let's manipulate this to 213, which means that in total I worked 120 minutes, which is right, but I worked today for 60 minutes and I will work tomorrow for 60 minutes. And here it looks like I worked for 2 hours in a row, which is not exactly right. Luckily, there is a faster and way more efficient way. But now that's it for this chapter. Let's move on to the next chapter. In this chapter, I want to build the ultimate dashboard with you that includes everything I mentioned at the end of the last chapter. In this chapter, I want to create the ultimate time tracking dashboard with you that includes everything from the previous chapters and the thing that I told you at the end of last chapter. First, look at what it looks like on the left side. So the first thing that we need to add is an estimated time. By the way, I didn't include this in this video. Now, if we haven't insert an estimated time, it will also show you time limit exceeded. What you could do, but I didn't want to add this into this video, is you could add an ifs, and now you could also check if estimated time is empty and then write something like you need to set an estimated time. So in this case you have 3 options instead of 2, but now because it's simpler, I want to only add an if statement. Now I spontaneously decided to create this. For everyone who wants to include this, now take a screenshot before we will move on. Now let's set our estimated time, in this case 45 minutes. Now we can also set an hourly rate, in this case 10 euros, and we can now start time tracking. And this will create an entry in another database, because now we don't track on the task level. We add an entry in a time database, which relates to our task database. So then we have our task database and can create different time entries. For example, if I want to work on a task now and tomorrow and the day after tomorrow and so on, and we can see every single time entry. Now let me click on end log, which will end this, and you can see we worked on this from 12:22 p.m. to 12:23 p.m., which is 1 minute. Now I could also start this again, which will give us another time entry. And I could also end this. Let's set this to 24, and we worked another minute on it. And you can see in total, we worked 2 minutes on this, which we can also see here. We worked on 2 minutes, and we can see our time limit isn't exceeded, and we earned 32 cents. Now let me change this to 122. So you can see we worked for 1 hour in total, and by working so long on it, we exceeded our time limit, and because it's 1 hour, we earned 10 euros. Now let's rebuild this on the right side. Now, as you can see, I already prepared the database because this is everything that we already did. So we don't need to recreate this. I think you should understand now how this works. So now we will build on everything that we built before. So here, first we need to add 3 formulas. One is called time. Let me put this into parentheses. One is called time in minutes, one is called time check, and one is called money earned. You might now argue, you said we built on this and now we create these formulas from the scratch, but these formulas differ from the ones that we previously created. You will see this in a second. The next thing that we need to create is we need to create a relation, because currently our databases, which are behind the side peak here, are not related. They are 2 separated databases. We want to link them, so just like a bridge. So we want to link our tasks level for build database to our time level for build database. And we want to see this in both databases. So now, as you can see, we have a relation that shows up here to this database and a relation that shows up here to this database. What we now also need to add is we need to add 2 button properties. We call the first one start log and the second one end log. Now let's create the first formula. Click in the formula property time in minutes. Then what we want to do is we want to access our relation. In this case, our only one, time level for build. Then we write .map, and in .map we write current, and then we want to access the total time. So what we did now is we went from this database via our relation in this database, and we grabbed the total time. Now what we need to do is we need to sum this up to add, in this case, 59 plus 1, and not have 59 and then 1 as a list. And that's it for our first formula. Then let's go for our second formula, our time check formula. We need to first add an if function again, press Shift and Enter and select estimated time. Then again write bigger or equal to, and now we need to access our relation again. So write time level for build dot map current, and then access our total time again and sum. What we do now is we check if our estimated time is bigger than all the entries total times together. And then we write comma, and if this is the case, we write time limit not exceeded again in a green and green background style. For the other case, we also write again what we did previously. We write time limit exceeded in a red and red background format. And here at the end, we also add the styling, bold and code. Then we can click on done and move on to our next formula. In the next formula, we once again use our relation, write dot map, then current dot, and then our total time again, write dot sum. And now we want to divide this by 60 again. So write dot divide by 60 go outside of the parentheses, and we want to then multiply this with our hourly rate. So write multiply and then in parentheses hourly rate. And now everything is okay and we can click on done. Then last but not least, we need to edit the automations of our buttons. First, let's go for the start button. We want to say if the button is clicked, we want to add a page to, and in this case, select our time database. What we want to do first is we want to automatically set the name of the new page to the name of our task. So what we can do is we can create a custom formula and say we want this page, so that page where the button is on, to use the name. So the name of every entry that is created in the time database will get the name from the page where the button is in. So in this case, every entry will get the name by the Mona Lisa. Then we also want to set our status to in progress, our start time to the time this button gets triggered, and we want to relate it to this page. So the page gets created and we always link it to the tasks entry. Now we can click on save and then we can also select our end log and edit the automation. Now here we want to define variables because we now only want to grab the entries and manipulate the entries where our status is in progress. Because otherwise, if I access all of them, if this is done and set to 12:22 p.m. and to 12:23 p.m., if I access all of them, I will overwrite this end time. And this is finished. So if the one below here is done, we don't want to change anything here. Let's say the one over here is in progress and has no end time. This is the entry we want to manipulate. So what we want to do is we create a formula. We want to select this page dot, and then we want to access our relation. So our time database. And then we want to write dot, in this case, filter, and we want to then only filter for the entries where the status is in progress. So we want to write current dot status and then we write equals and then in progress. And now we have defined our first variable. We can also rename this to time entries in progress. And now we can move on with our next action. Then we can say we want to add pages in, and here we can select our variable. So all the entries that are in progress. So click on time entries in progress, set the status to done, and set the end time to the time triggered, and you can click on save. So now let's set an estimated time for 45 minutes, an hourly rate for 10 euros. Then we can click on start log, which will create an entry here, which has the exact same name. We have a start date. You can also wrap this. We have our status to in progress. We added the task in the relation. Now we can end this log. Let me also wrap this and manipulate this to 12:41 p.m. So we have 1 minute. So everything here is done. And if we go in here, we can see we worked for 1 minute on this, which didn't exceed our time limit. Now let me change this to 2 decimal places. So now we earned 17 cents and our time limit is not exceeded. Now if I click on start log, we will create another entry. And if I now click on end log, watch this, this is 12:41 p.m. If we did everything right, this shouldn't change to our new end date. So now click on end log and we can see here, this remains, this gets changed. We have 2 minutes in total, which didn't exceed our time limit. Let's for now set this to 1 minute. Now we can see time limit exceeded and we are done. So as you can see, buttons are a very powerful feature that can save you a lot of time. So if you want more use cases, watch this video over here. Stay consistent. See you next.